Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is David. I'm known as Unity Freedom. And today is Good Friday, so hopefully everyone enjoys their one-day vacation. So today's topic that I will be talking about is an extension of last week's topic about changing consciousness and versus shifting consciousness. So without further ado, we'll jump right in. So last week I talked about the difference between changing consciousness versus shifting consciousness. So today I'm going to expand that to how do you determine the difference and what are the consequences between the implications between changing consciousness and shifting consciousness. So to explain to you what it means is that nature, what we're living on earth, nature, is an open system. It flows. It's unpredictable. And in nature, things just happen without any means of control. So in nature, you cannot really control the situation, such as you can't control the weather, you can't control how animals behave or wild animals behave. When you see them, when you see a wild animal such as the bear, you take precautions so the bear doesn't attack you. But nonetheless, in an open system, which is nature, which is reality, things are just what people call, it's like a box of chocolate where nothing you can ever yourself predict the outcome. So in an open system, everything is connected. We interdependently rely on other people's actions. And also sometimes if we're spiritual, we receive guidance and gut feelings from our inner voice inside of us, which is, in some spiritual teachings, is the higher self. In a more advanced teaching, people call it the I am presence. So we're not really disconnected from our higher self. We are connected somehow to our higher self, where we get insights and intuition. And sometimes, even if we are more spiritual, we are connected deeper with our spiritual guides. And in terms of a more advanced spiritual teaching, our spiritual guides can be called as the ascended masters, which means spiritual beings who have a higher level of wisdom than we have. So all of it in the open system, we're all connected to it. And then if we flow with an open system, what comes about with an open system is that we are able to imagine things that are not yet invented or produced right now. We can imagine it, because that's what an open system is. There's new information you get, you see an opportunity to create new devices, new ways of doing things, and new ideas to maybe explain things that the old ways could not explain. So this is an open system. Now, of course, with an open system, you cannot selectively experience a certain condition a certain situation. And so what happens is we can also create a closed system. Now, what is a closed system? Obviously, a closed system is closed from the open. It's designed to contain a certain information where you can use it to create conditions that you want to experience. For example, you can actually, if you can do an exercise on your own, you put all the old things in your room from the 80s, from the 70s, and you have movies, and you play music from the 80s and 70s. And if you shut yourself in that room and you play the music and you play the movies and you have pictures of the 70s and 80s, you will feel that you're living in the 70s and 80s in that room that you specifically set up to live in. And of course, outside of that room is reality. It is now. But in that room, you can create temporarily an experience that is different from the outside. And you can literally change your consciousness to make you believe that you're living, when you're in that room, the era of the 70s and 80s. Now, if you don't leave that room, if that room is big enough to contain, you can eat, you can sleep, you can breathe, you can walk around. You may be living in a simulator, a big enough warehouse, a simulator that simulates the life of the 70s and 80s. That would make you believe that you're actually living in the 70s and 80s in that warehouse. In that warehouse you created, big enough to hold the illusion that you're living in the 70s and 80s. This is what a closed system can do for you, can do to you, is make you believe you're living in that century. But outside of that warehouse, of that room, is reality. It is now. But it is now does not affect that closed system. Now, of course, you can stay in that closed system for quite a while. But in the end, the closed system will always experience what is called entropy, which is the second law of thermodynamics. Whatever that is stagnant will self-destruct. And so, in the closed system, eventually, the person inside a closed system will realize that it feels limited. It feels like the experience cannot be expanded further. And so, if the person decides to open the door ever so slightly or open the window ever so slightly, it can peek outside of the room and see glimpses of the open system. And of course, when a person sees glimpses of the open system, which is the now, it can see that I don't want to live in this closed system anymore, because the open system offers me more experiences. I can do more things in the open system. And so, some people who have taken the peek, who has saw what an open system can offer, recognizes that it's an open system, and consciously realize it is an open system, and consciously realizes that the person is in a closed system, can take the leap of faith into the open system. And this leap of faith from a closed system to an open system in spirituality is enlightenment. You're enlightened. You saw what is possible that you can achieve in an open system where you used to be from a closed system. Now, if you think about a closed system, such as, for example, an aquarium is a closed system. You buy the fish from the pet store, and the fish, like say a pair of guppies, you buy the pair of guppies and you put them in your aquarium, and they mate, and they have little guppies. The baby guppies were born in the aquarium, and the baby guppies only know life inside the aquarium, and it knows that, expects that someone will feed them and someone will change the water in the aquarium. All it knows in that life for the baby guppies is that environment is a man-made environment in the aquarium. And for those guppies, life is as real as it is in the aquarium. It does not know the life outside of the aquarium because it hasn't experienced that. The parents that were caught in the wild may have experienced life in the wild, but the baby guppies that were born in the aquarium have not experienced the wild experience, the wild conditions that their parents did. So the baby guppies live and die in the aquarium. Now, it is kind of the same thing that I experience, that if I go into a closed system, the closed system can actually convince me that I was born in that system, that I live and breathe and die basically in that system. Because the purpose of the closed system is to convince you, to continue to give you the illusion that that's where you're from and that's where you should die. Life starts from a closed system and ends in a closed system. There is nothing outside of the closed system. So in the closed system, we tend to change our consciousness and evolve around the closed system to convince us that it is a closed system. So if you think about the baby guppies in the aquarium, it might swim around, it might do many things in the aquarium, but it is doing all the things inside the aquarium. It does not have any awareness outside of the aquarium, the origin of where the parents' guppies came from. It only knows the inside the aquarium. And so even like for a human being in a closed system, it can experience a certain condition, a certain role, a certain identity, but it's reinforced by the closed system. Now, of course, the aquarium would have people looking at the aquarium. Those people are from the outside and from the open system. And people who are from the open system can interact with someone in the closed system. A limited interaction, like the guppies can see the people outside the aquarium through the glass. It sees human, and it forms a particular experience looking at the humans. Just like a closed system, if someone in the closed system meets someone from the open system, it can interact and form an experience of interacting with someone from an open system. But the belief system from someone from the open system differs from someone from the closed system. So in my experience, when I was in the closed system and someone from the open system comes and tell me, "Hey, David, do you know that you're in the closed system? Do you know that you are in the closed system, that you believe that you're in the open system, but you're not?" Those people are have good intentions. They see, when they see themselves coming from an open system and they see someone coming from a closed system, the tendency is to try to change that person's perception that you're living in a closed system, that you need to examine yourself, that you are living in a closed system, and trying to change their mind to change their belief from they themselves living in a closed system to living in an open system. So when you live in an open system, basically you're connected to everyone, to nature, to reality. That you accept reality as what they are, or what it is. Because you're connected to reality. You're not denying reality. You're not brushing off reality, but you're learning the consequences of what you did. Reality is the mirror to the things that you do as the consequences of your choices. So when you are in the open system and you see someone in the closed system, you can see the obvious, that they are trapped in believing that what they're doing is reality, when in fact, you can see the reality differs from the results that they did or they manifested. And if you go back to my video about suffering, the gap between your expectations and reality is suffering. So the bigger the gap, the more frustration and disappointment that you feel, because your expected reality does not align with reality, with the real reality. But with someone with and living in an open system, the gap is actually pretty narrow, because the person accepts reality. It might be a little different than the expected outcome compared to reality, but that difference is very narrow, sometimes insignificant, because the person who is in the open system accepts the open system, accepts reality. And so there is no frustration, no sense of suffering due to the insignificant gap between the experience, expected experience, and the real experience. But a person who is living in a closed system always has this gap between reality and their expected experience, because that experience comes from a closed system. So I talked already about the closed system. Now I'm going to talk about the open system and how the open system is different from a closed system. An open system allows you to connect to other people, to nature, and allows to have an open mind to accept new ideas, new insights, new ways of doing things, and then new knowledge that hasn't been invented or discovered before. It doesn't limit you like a closed system does. So the open system allows you to become imaginative, allows you to create new things. And in that way, doesn't really limit you compared to a closed system. Now, someone who is in an open system meet someone who is in a closed system. Now, someone in the open system may try to change the consciousness of someone who is in a closed system. But realize this, if you try to change someone who is in a closed system, someone who is in a closed system will feel threatened, might be at first curious about what you have to offer, because you're offering something from an open system, new ideas, new ways of doing things. But over time, that someone who is in a closed system will feel threatened because it challenges the psychology of that person who is in the closed system. You imagine that if someone who is still living in the 70s and 80s and meets someone who is living in the now, the someone who is living in the now may pose a challenge to someone who is living in the past. Because someone living in the past feels safe in the past, but not so in the present, in the now. So if someone comes along and share new ideas of now with someone who is living in a closed system, someone living in the closed system can feel threatened and may eventually, if the threat is still there, might use violence, might use many means to try and put down the new ideas, put down the person that has an open mind, living in an open system. And so that someone will use many things to bully the person who embraces the open system, to shut their mouth or not to share new ideas anymore. So this person who is living in a closed system will feel isolated. And so if someone who is living in an open system sees someone who is living in a closed system, what would be the best approach to showcase that someone that he is or she is living in a closed system? In my experience, it is through demonstrating that you are living in an open system, the benefits of an open system, and how the open system, when you're open to new ideas and new things and doing things, how your results, your experiences, how your outcome will closely align with reality. As opposed to someone who lives in a closed system, that their reality, that their experiences and the outcome of their experiences from the choices they make based on a closed system do not align closely with reality. And so demonstrating to these people who are living in a closed system, showing them that the benefits of an open system, this is what you get. And then it is up to you to make a choice. Do you want to live in a closed system and continue on living in a closed system? Or do you want to shift your consciousness and escape from a closed system and start living in an open system? Because moving from a closed system to an open system requires a shift in consciousness, not a change in consciousness. Because you can change your consciousness to live in a closed system, but you need to shift your consciousness back to living in an open system. Because when you shift into living in a closed system, your identity and everything you believe will change temporarily to being in a closed system, to give you that unique experience of a closed system. But in order for you to to move, to escape from a closed system, you can't change back your consciousness to an open system. Because if you do that, it might give you the belief that you will have changed your consciousness to an open system, but you're still trapped in a closed system. So that is why you see many people out there who are actually demonstrating various limitations and how they escaped, overcome those limitations by shifting their consciousness, not trying to fix whatever in the closed system that you are in now, but walking away from it. Saying to yourself, yes, I have had enough of this experience. I want to move on to something new. And by you saying that, you acknowledge you are in a closed system. And when you move on to an open system, you're back. You're back to receiving new insights, new knowledge. You're back to accepting new teachings, new ways of doing things, new ways of life, a new perspective on life that you see now once you move back or shifted back to an open system. And so that's what I want to share with you right now, the difference between the closed system and an open system, and how changing consciousness can temporarily put you in a closed system. But the closed system can convince you that you're living in an open system. And in order for you to escape the closed system that you put yourself in, you have to acknowledge that you are in the closed system, that you're willing to make a conscious choice to move away from the closed system and then embrace the open system again. Now, when you get better, when you're awakened many times, you will see that the process becomes easier because you can create a unique closed system for you to experience a certain experience. For example, you want to experience running a marathon. So you create a closed system and then you put your identity as a marathon runner. And then you train yourself to run a marathon. Everything would reflect to that closed system. But you're aware, you just took on a temporary identity as someone running a marathon. You're not that runner. You're just taking a temporary identity. Once you're done with it, you leave that closed system and then you create something new, another hobby or another interest that you want to go into. So when you become more awakened, more self-aware that you're meant to live in an open system, but you're allowed to go into a closed system for a period of time to experience that experience. Because the open system, you can experience many things. A closed system allows you to define the experience and learn from that experience so that you have a definite, unique experience of that particular experience because it's confined, it's isolated. So you understand that experience. You have internalized that experience. If you have stolen money and you experience the consequences, and then you say, I don't want to steal money anymore, that in itself is a great learning experience because you now have internalized the consequences of you stealing money. But you stole money, so you jump out from the open system into a closed system so that you can experience this act of stealing money or gambling with money. But then you realize the consequences of that, and you don't want anything to do with it, and you want to become a law-abiding citizen again. So you jump out, you escape from this closed system, and then back to the open system. So you can go back and forth, escaping the closed system, have the experience, a unique experience of the closed system, jump back out. Just like many of us, we listen to the 70s and 80s music, we watch 70s and 80s movies. Some of us enjoy it, but it's just an experience. You're going there to have a certain unique experience that you haven't had before. But once you had the experience, you can walk away from it. However, many of us are trapped in certain closed systems and we cannot get out of. And this is what I'm trying to share, the insights, is that you need to recognize that you are in a closed system or you are in an open system. In an open system, you're always open to new ideas. You're always open to new insights. You're open to even criticism from other people, from your peers, so you can become a better person. So you're open to that. But when you're in the closed system, you're closed to everyone. You feel that you're always right. You feel that everything that you do is right. So that's the thing I'd like to share today. I hope to share more. Thank you for listening to my insights. Please subscribe to my channel, and I will see you soon. Bye for now.